Hi guys, welcome to the season premiere of Arjuneus podcasts. That sounds stupid. I don't even know if I want to call it Arjuneus podcast because it's not me podcasting, it's a bunch of other people.
Arjuneus conversates.
First it went from him talking, now it's him conversating. What's next? Him screaming like
Arjuneus telepathically communicates.
I have my good friend Gabe here. Gabe, would you like to introduce yourself? Yo, I'm a hippie. I do drugs and
Y'all looking for mushrooms? Hit me up.
All right, you want to get just right into it? Is she here? Yeah, she is here.
Sorry for disturbing.
No worries.
We're just playing with you.
Very gifts.
Yay.
All for your good work.
Oh wow. Thank
Oh
you.
my gosh.
Oh,
It's a passion.
passion fruit from Boiling Point all the time. Wow, well, this is a pleasant surprise. Thank you, Serenity.
Of course.
Man, this is
Dude,
awesome.
whenever I wonder if we're like living on heaven on earth, a gorgeous goddess shows up with boba,
Super clutch.
passion fruit boba. Let me see.
Thank you, Serenity. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today we are going to go in a different direction in my channel. We are going to start a podcast series. This was actually requested by Gwenny on Patreon, and I decided why not just do a couple episodes to see how you guys like it and just experiment. So today I have a very special guest, my friend Gabriel. Gabe, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, totally. Thank you so much for this, brother. And thank you to Gwenny, is it,
Yeah.
that requested this?
Gwenny.
Gwenny, a real one. My name is Gabriel Galindo. Gabriel, Gabe, Gabby, any variation works. And I am a yoga instructor. I teach yoga. I've been teaching yoga full time for about 6 years in Los Angeles. I am the creator of the Yoga and Surf Society, co-founder of Yoga Marga School of Liberation. I am a member of the House of Liberation, a conscious community home here in Koreatown. And many other labels and things that I'm sure we'll get into.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here, but I am curious, like, so House of Liberation is like an all plant-based community, right? How did you like get into this, like what gravitated you toward like plant-based living and veganism, and like what got you like initially started into this transition that you want to do?
Totally. I think through the study of yoga and through the study specifically of the 8 limbs, one of the principles in the 8 limbs is ahimsa, this idea of non-harming.
Right.
And as I started creating my own projects and as I started getting deeper into that world, I realized that there is a particular type of diet that contributes to less suffering in the world than another. And really what pushed me further in that space was my partner. I started dating my partner, she's also the co-founder of my yoga school, Serenity Tedesco, and she's been a vegan her whole life. So really, I've been predominantly plant-based, but have really started making the switch towards fully vegan for about 8 months now. And I really have to attribute that mainly to her. She was a person that has really sort of opened my eyes to not just the physical benefits, but also the spiritual benefits of living a life where we try to follow these principles of ahimsa. And what does that look like in the modern day living?
Right, that's pretty cool. So you said you've been transitioning for 8 months. Like, do you feel like you've like hit like roadblocks or like that you're trying to overcome with Serenity, or?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think the biggest surprise for me was actually how much, how easy it actually was. I was expecting to have more of a hard time making the transition. I think it helps a lot that she's an incredible cook. It helps a lot to live in a place like Koreatown, like Los Angeles, where there's access to a lot of really great options. But yeah, it's actually, I really haven't hit any major roadblocks. I still catch myself. I think I was really committed to the idea that I needed to eat eggs, that I needed dairy, that I needed cheese, all these things.
Yeah.
But actually, with a little bit of planning, it hasn't been that difficult to actually make that switch and really invest that in my life every day. I think overall, it has been one of the most fulfilling things of my life to be able to like feel better in my body and to notice the benefits that I've experienced physically, especially as a coach for athletes and as a teacher of athletes and as a teacher of yogis and people that are very physical and embodied, noticing the difference in my performance before and after has been a big change. So it hasn't been that difficult of a change for me.
That's great. That's great. So how did you like get into like yoga? Like I know you were telling me before that like when you got into like plant-based living, it kind of like helped you like transition into like a lot of this like yoga and like learning about ahimsa. It was like almost like a gateway, I guess, to like get into the space.
Totally.
And you were in the military as well, so it's so interesting that like you went from the military of like a very stringent lifestyle with exercise and into bringing that stringentness into yoga. And it's interesting because I feel like a lot of people that do yoga, they feel like it's like a very relaxing type of like exercise and a very like chill type of Zen type of like philosophy. But you have a totally different approach on it.
Yeah,
So,
totally. How did I get? So there's a few questions, a few things to unpack from there.
Absolutely.
How did I get into yoga, and then how did I get into plant-based living, and is it connected to yoga? So I think I'll work backwards with yoga specifically. I've been practicing and teaching yoga longer than I've been predominantly plant-based. When I first started teaching, this was about end of 2017, early 2018 is when I started teaching yoga, and I was still an omnivore. I was just eating anything. I think I would consider myself to be more of an intuitive eater, so I just ate whatever was available. It wasn't until I really started in these past couple of years having these really big breakthroughs spiritually that I realized that there was layers to things. And for me to reach this next layer, this next step, I think the level of devotion needed to be a little bit higher. So that looks like making sacrifices. That looks like, stepping into something that was perhaps outside of my wheelhouse, out of my comfort zone. And yeah, my approach to yoga, I think you're right. I think there's a conception idea that people think when they think of yoga, and they think that it's this very relaxing and calming practice, and that we're there to just sort of zen out or mellow out. And I think the practice can be that. And there's so many different styles and forms and manifestations of yoga. For me, yoga was a pathway to discovering resilience, a pathway to unearthing things in myself that I didn't know I was capable of doing. So my first yoga class was about 15 years ago at a local LA Fitness in Dallas, Texas. And I got hired as a salesperson. This is before I joined the military. Right. And one of the things that I had to do was take all the fitness classes in that room. Spin classes, Zumba classes. I had to do all of that. One of the things that I had to do was a yoga class. And I'd always consider myself, at least at that time, to be relatively fit, someone that liked to work out and exercise and run. And I noticed that when I did this yoga class, I was drenched in sweat. Yeah. And I'm in this room and I can barely touch my toes. And I look to my right and there's this 60-year-old woman that's doing everything. She's, bouncing on her hands and flipping backwards and doing all the things. And I was just so shocked at how unflexible I was, how difficult of a time I had during that class, how hard it was for me to breathe. And so fast forward to, 2013, 2014, I joined the military. I was an aircraft mechanic in the Airforce. And one of the first things that I noticed was the ways in which everyone that I worked with had such a hard time with the job. The job was very physically demanding. We're on our knees, we're ducking under jets. So getting ourselves in very difficult, weird angles with tools and power tools and trying to work, doing this very heavy maintenance work. And because I had a sort of relative yoga practice, a very physical asana practice, asana meaning the physical practice of yoga postures, I noticed that it was easier for me. It was easier for me to squat down and sit and squat and sort of remove parts and change panels and do things compared to some of my colleagues and some of my friends. When I left the military in 2017, I was sort of at a loss. I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. Yoga wasn't even in the top 20 of the things that I thought I'd be doing with my life. And I stumbled into a yoga studio when I moved to LA and literally never left. I worked back in the day at this studio. They had this thing where you wouldn't even get paid. You just worked as a cleaner. I cleaned toilets, I cleaned the mats, I cleaned the floor.
Is she getting ramen. We'll be right back after this commercial break. Hey guys, my name is Arjun. If you do enjoy what we're talking about, I actually have a book called Wisdom Through Psychology that you can get on Amazon, or you can get a signed copy from the link in the description. So be sure to check it out if you don't already have that book. And it takes less than 5 minutes a day to read.
So yeah, man, I get out of the military. I'm working at this yoga studio. I'm not really getting paid. It's just a work trade situation, just so I can get a free membership. And a lot of life then was taking a lot of classes, working at the yoga studio. I basically lived there. I was taking 2 to 3 yoga classes per day. And finally, a friend of mine who ended up becoming my yoga instructor, he asked me, he said, you know, would you like to be a yoga teacher? Have you thought about that? I said, hey man, there's no way. Like, I just like doing this, but I can't see myself teaching. Yeah. I have a crazy fear of like public speaking and fear of like being in front of people. Like, that's just not my vibe. But just for shits and giggles, like, how much is it? How much would it cost to do this like yoga certification? And he gives me a price tag. He's like, okay, with, you know, you were in the military before, so you get a discount. And he said some number, and I don't remember the exact number, but it was something like $2,500.86. And I checked my account. I checked my checking account, and at that time, to the cent, $2,586 to the very cent is how much money I had left.
You had the exact amount of money. So did you see it as like maybe it was like a sign or something?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Well, because
wow.
At that time I was really struggling, man. I was living on my friend's couch, paying like $300 a month. I was doing DoorDash and Uber, and I was just doing whatever I could to sort of like make ends meet. And when I saw that, it was such a clear sign. It was such a clear sign of, you know, you love this thing, why not like invest in yourself? Why not take the plunge? $2,000 is a lot of money, but at the same time.
So you went like all in, like every single cent you had.
Everything
you just put it in there. You're like, this is it.
I had a teacher one time that told me that in order for us to really build ourselves, we sometimes have to go down to zero. And to me, that was a literal way that I went down to zero to be able to step into this next stage of my life. Mm. And it changed everything. It literally changed my life, not just physically, mentally, emotionally, but financially. I mean, everything for me changed from that one decision of making that plunge and making that choice. So yeah, ever since then, I've continued to still live at yoga studios. And now I'm, you know, very, very happy to like run my own studio. I've been a director at different yoga studios. I've done so many teacher trainings. I've taught other teachers now how to teach yoga and business of yoga workshops. And my life completely changed from that moment. And now my biggest joy is to be able to create that space for other people to make that plunge and to make that decision to live a life that is more rooted on what does it mean to live like a self-actualized life, and how do we incorporate that into our everyday life. So, and I think that now for me, living plant-based is an essential part of what that looks like.
Yeah, I always tell people, like, it's not just like from like a health perspective, it's not just about your physical health, because I feel like that gets covered a lot in the media about how plant-based foods can really help your physical health. It can reverse diseases, it can clear your skin up, but mentally it can really help you sharpen your focus. Totally. And become so much more conscious. And when you're more conscious of things, you're able to psychoanalyze yourself and other people more. You develop an intelligence that eventually allows you to self-actualize and come to an enlightenment of how your life is. Yeah. And you're just more open. And it's a shame, because I do see some like people that like will go plant-based, but they won't like eat like healthy plant-based foods. They'll drink like soda and they'll drink all this other crap. Yeah. But their heart's in the right place, because they want to do it for like the animals, which is a great, great noble reason to do it for.
Totally.
But I feel like in the coming years, it's really great to just incorporate all the different elements of veganism. Like, you're doing it for the animals, but you should also reward your body and respect it, because you're respecting animals by not eating them. But I think you should also respect your own body by kind of perhaps you might want to use these like meat substitutes to like transition. I feel like maybe the first 2 years, that's what I always tell people that are transitioning to veganism. Maybe the first 2 years, consume Beyond Meat, consume Impossible Meat, just so that you can kind of like slowly habituate away from meat
Yeah.
in a way that's not like a total shock in your body that like makes you binge back, because I do notice that people will go back to binging it. Some people can do it though. Some people can go vegan overnight. I've seen it happen. But I do feel like if you kind of have like a game plan of like, all right, after these 9 months, I'm going to stop eating this. After 3 months after that, I'm going to completely cut off on cheese. When you have like a gradual step-by-step process, it's just so much easier to do it, because you're just slightly tweaking your life one step at a time through these habits. And yeah, like I'm saying, like with like going back to like how it helps you with your mental health, like it's so important for you to have good mental health, especially because you're going to be in a minority community now, right? Most people are meat eaters. Most people are even vegetarians outnumber us. So it's like it's important to have your mind sharp and clear, and you're able to articulate your thoughts, because people don't understand veganism. People still, it's 2023, and people are still like confused why we're making our food look like meat, why we're not worried about the insects dying in crop deaths. Like there's all this like propaganda that's being thrown around, and unless you're able to completely articulate your point, you won't even know why you're a vegan. And I think it's so important, because I've seen people that go vegan because their heart's in the right place. They think they're doing the right thing, and they really believe it until they get into a debate, and then they feel like like an idiot because they weren't able to articulate their case, and now everyone's laughing at them, and yada yada yada. So I feel like that comes down to mental health primarily. I mean, there's of course other aspects involved. You can learn how to debate, you can learn speech, you can learn how to articulate. You can do it like the actual mechanical way, but I do think being conscious is like the source root of being able to articulate your thoughts. So that self-awareness really helps. And it's definitely not going to happen with junk food. Not to say that you shouldn't never not eat junk food. Like you can have it like in like increments, but as long as like your mental health is like your priority number one. Because even I have cheat days, you know, like I'll try to eat healthy most of the week, but maybe once a week I'll have like a cheat day where I really just binge on like cookies or something.
Yeah, totally.
You know, so it's, I'm not saying like to be like absolute strict, although it would be preferable,
Of course.
but it's like anyone like could do it. You know, it's like you just need to primarily keep yourself in check. And it sucks in the beginning because you're like completely going against the Matrix's programming on what they want you to eat. They're shoving down, you know, like we're talking about how some places on the road, they have nothing but fast food. They're trying to make you eat the food that they want you to eat.
Totally.
And they don't want you to eat the produce. So it's like, it's really hard building that discipline, but once you have that discipline, it's so rewarding because you never want to go back to eating that shit again because you know how it's going to how it's going to affect you mentally, right?
Yeah, dude, I really appreciate you bringing up the sort of mental resiliency aspect of it. One thing that became super evident to me, especially once I started becoming a member of this community that is predominantly plant-based and dating my partner who is vegan and has been vegan her whole life, was realizing the layers of misinformation and how deeply ingrained it was, even in my life. I mean, I was born in New York City, but I was raised in Colombia, in Bogota, in South America. And almost all of our meals include some sort of like animal product of some sort. And so I grew up with this idea, and also from the military, like these ideas are ingrained into my mind of like, you need to have animal protein. You need, you know, all of these things because otherwise you won't be healthy. Otherwise you're missing out on all these nutrients. You're missing out on all these different things. And one of the lessons that sort of ties in more directly to Buddhism is this idea of not taking everything the teacher says as the final word, but exploring this by yourself. Find out. Go and find out what is the better alternative. Do your own research. Find out what works, what doesn't work. And in the spirit of that, I realized how much of a game changer it has been for professional athletes and Olympic athletes to transition into fully plant-based lifestyles, and how much it's lowered their inflammation, and how much so many of these different metrics increased for them from that switch. And then on my own life, I love yoga, and yoga is probably the primary movement modality that I practice, but I'm also a rock climber and a surfer, and I love riding motorcycles, and I do all these very physical things in the world. So these things are very important to me. How is my body performing? How soon can I recover? If I go to the gym, is it going to take me 2 days to not feel sore anymore so I can go back? all of these things are very important to me, and I noticed how much easier it was for my body to recover once it didn't have to recover just from the inflammation of the meals that I was eating on a regular basis. And yeah, I think that it's very obvious to know that there's a narrative when you walk into a place and every single option has meat in it of some sort. And it's really a giant disservice to Black and brown communities as well. You go to some of these neighborhoods. We were actually having a conversation about this a little while ago. You go to these places, it's a food desert, and every out of the corner, there's not a single grocery store, there's no veggies, there's no anything, but what you do find is sugar and fast food at every single corner.
Yeah.
And I believe that those things are not just a coincidence.
It's not. There's actually a term for it. It's called environmental racism. Have you heard of it?
Oh, dude, please tell me more.
Environmental racism. So this is a term that basically explains how people of color are targeted primarily to work at slaughterhouses, live by animal agriculture farms. So they're the primary target of these campaigns and propaganda because they're easier to target, right?
Yeah.
So people of color, they're easier to target. People that can't speak English, the new immigrants are coming. They'll make them work at the slaughterhouses because they can't really find any other job.
Yeah.
And they can't do anything about it because what else are they going to do? How are they going to make money? So they're targeting these communities that they know are going to be forced to work for them.
Yeah.
So they're going to target the people that don't have an income. They're going to target people that can't speak English that well.
Yeah.
People that basically are very, very vulnerable to their propaganda.
Yeah,
and by doing that, they can get it spread and institutionalized into them. And the thing is, it's bad because not only are you ruining their health, but people that work in slaughterhouses, they don't enjoy their job. Most of them don't enjoy their job. They get traumatized from having to kill animals. And the more sinister thing about that is some of them do it for so long that they actually have to convince themselves to enjoy working because it's work. They have to find some sort of passion to get through the day. So it literally turns you psychotic by working there because now you have to convince yourself that this is the rest of my life. I'm going to be killing animals at the slaughterhouse, so I might as well have fun with it and might as well enjoy it because this is a coping mechanism, right?
Yeah.
Even in the corporate world, I see people creating coping mechanisms for trying to enjoy something that they really deep down know they're not enjoying, but they have to convince themselves at some degree that this is the right choice I'm making because I got to feed my family. So if I'm going to spend the majority of my life 8 hours a day, Monday through Friday, doing something, I have to create some sort of narrative that makes me enjoy it. And unfortunately, that narrative happens to be enjoying killing people, or killing animals, right? And some take pleasure in it. Some find entertainment in it. And, just like how we study these serial killers where they actually really, like Jeffrey Dahmer, he found a lot of pleasure in cracking people's bones. That was a thing for him. He just loved breaking chickens' necks apart because he just loved the sound of the crack. So it's almost they'll find a fixation to get some sort of serotonin rush that allows them to enjoy the killing so that they can ignore the actual empathetic part of the animal and completely cut that connection off.
Totally.
So environmental racism is deep. I mean, that's just one aspect of it, but it's also the aspect in the Matrix creating a environment where people that are in these neighborhoods, they only can access fast food and then they'll market it to them so that they grow up their entire life eating KFC, they grow up their entire life eating McDonald's, eating Burger King.
Yeah.
And it institutionalizes it into them in a way that they think it's their choice.
Yeah.
But in actuality, they have created a environment that naturally makes them gravitate toward these foods.
Yeah.
Because in actuality, anyone can go to a grocery store and get an apple, right? But you're never going to see an advertisement for an apple on TV. They're never going to show it. They're going to show you get pizza. They're going to show you get burgers. They're going to keep showing the glamorization of these dead bodies on television so that your mouth is craving it because they know how to market to these guys.
Totally.
And they know no one's going to really detect it unless
Yeah.
they really dig into their system. And
Yeah,
they're just
totally.
no, we're going to keep you guys distracted. It's been working for thousands of years. And as long as they can get other people to do word of mouth marketing and get their friends and family to convince them that, yeah, this is good, they are safe. They are going to keep on doing this propaganda. And I think that's really how the Matrix works.
Yeah.
They get you institutionalized in it so that you can get your clan and your family and your friends into their marketing scheme.
Totally buying into the same reality where this is just normal. It's just normal to eat animals. It's just normal to benefit off the suffering of other sentient beings. It's just normal to live this kind of life, and yeah, man, it's incredible. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and it's incredible. She's a musician, and we were talking about the power of sound and how sound operates in parts of our brain that we don't even realize. And we talked about how I don't like soda. Like even when I was younger, I've just never been a fan of like big sugary drinks, and I really don't enjoy the way popcorn sticks to my teeth.
Yeah.
But I never want soda and popcorn as badly as I do when I'm sitting at the movie theater and then the announcement comes on and then the big,
Yeah.
and then all the sounds, and it just looks like the
The
most.
most dramatic Coke opening. Like,
But you never want Coke and popcorn more than in that moment, you know?
That's
And it's
so
because
true.
the sound, man. It's the sound. It's entering into our being, and it's making these connections in our brain that just, it never sounds more appealing than that, you know? And then you have it, and then the reality is not what the expectation is, never matches the reality of what actually happens. But yeah, there's a version of that that's happening all the time, right? That reality is being created inside of the mind. And this is more of a yoga philosophy, but as we create reality, we are affected by the reality that is created in the minds of others. And then that is what becomes the co-reality. This matrix of ours is a combination of factors. It's not just the world that we live in, but it's a world that is created and that is perpetuated by our belief systems. So if everyone has the same belief systems, then this world starts materializing where those things are just normal. It's normal to have, 10 KFCs in the ghetto, or it's normal to have like all these different things. And I'm very interested in what does it look like to give people the tools to be able to ask questions, to be able to be fully embodied, and to notice and to close their eyes and meditate, and then realize, what does it feel like to have water in my system compared to a Diet Coke? And what does it literally feel like? Not just the instant dopamine hit of like, oh, it tastes amazing, but like, how does your body actually truly feel? And the practice of yoga and yogasana gives you those tools. It gives you the tools to be able to like be more embodied and notice those differences and feel those differences more acutely, more powerfully. And then from there, once you're aware of something, you can change it. But it doesn't happen the other way around. If there is no awareness, you can't change something that you don't know exists, that you don't know is there. So for me, I realized that the power of what this practice is, it transcends just the abs and the flexibility and the handstands and all the whatever reasons people would get into that.
how would one become more conscious of their eating if they wanted to? Like, do they actually have to go through a series of training to do it, or can they like maybe just do a simple exercise right now as they're watching this video?
Oh man, I love this question. I've been leading these daily meditations where we go through that we basically answer this question in different ways. But yeah, and if you're watching this, consider putting a timer. And this is what I tell to all my clients and everyone who says that they don't have the time to meditate, or they don't have the patience, or fill in the blank reason why you can't do it. Put a timer. Put a timer on. And most everyone has 5 minutes. I don't believe for a second that there's someone that is just so absolutely busy that they just can't give themselves just 5 minutes of their day to just sit.
Yeah.
Put the timer, put the phone down, close your eyes, and notice how quickly you want to fidget, how quickly you want to move, how quickly the thoughts come in. These things that seemingly feel like we have control over, once we actually sit, we realize how much we don't. And the level of inability to sit with that discomfort or sit with whatever arises is directly proportional to how we are able to show up in the world. Because if we're not operating from a conscious place, if I can't consciously give myself 5 minutes to do absolutely nothing, that means that there are other mechanisms at play that are operating on my subconscious and are dictating my behavior. So I would start there. I would literally start with, where does your mind go when you close your eyes and you want to give yourself 5 minutes? Yeah. And if you have a difficulty making it to the end of that timer, then maybe there's something there. Maybe there's something there to explore. And then from there, I would say there's a million things that you can do from there on out. I think going into the breath is an important practice. Even beyond that, there are 8 limbs of yoga as outlined by Patanjali. And the first 4 limbs, yamas, niyamas, asana, and pranayama. Yamas and niyamas deal with ethical constraints. In the yamas, we find ahimsa, and I would say study that. Understand, what does that mean? What does it mean to live a life where I'm causing no harm? What does it mean to live a life where I am practicing principles that deal with ethics, the way I treat myself and the way I treat others? The third limb is yoga asana. So yoga asana being the physical practice of postures, the physical movement, the warrior twos, and all the different things that we've come to know as yoga in the West. And then the next stage is pranayama, the actual control of the breath as we move through the postures. There's a reason why yamas and niyamas are first. Before we get into yoga postures, before we start playing with our breath, we have to notice, how do we show up for ourselves, yamas and niyamas, and how do we show up in others, and how do we treat other people? And we only do that through the careful observation of just how we show up. So how do I know, how do I treat myself? I sit down for 5 minutes. I set the intention that I want to be still, that I want to meditate for 5 minutes. And if I have a difficulty doing this, everything that is happening, if I'm actually paying attention, will show itself in those 5 minutes. Where does my attention go? What are the things, what are the proclivities or things that I kind of normally gravitate towards? What is my relationship with discomfort? Creating that space for that is incredibly important. So I would start there for someone that has no understanding or no access. 5 minutes. 5 minutes on a timer, close your eyes and just breathe, and then just notice what comes up.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's interesting because it's like a meditation, but it also simultaneously sounds like you're psychoanalyzing yourself, because the thoughts that come to your head, it's like you're basically telling yourself what you are having anxieties about, what you have fears about.
Yeah.
All the thoughts in your subconscious are finally being able to voice themselves to your conscious, because now your conscious is like prepared to shut down, be quiet, and listen to the other voices in the back of your head. So I think that's a genius way of doing it. And
Totally.
I totally agree with you. Like, I think everyone should be able to do this. You have 5 minutes out of the day, definitely, to do a very simple exercise for yourself. I say the same thing about my book. Everyone should be able to read it because it just takes 5 minutes a day to read. So it's like you could make 5 minutes to do anything that you want for self-development, whether it's meditation, whether it's reading, whether it's a simple exercise, whether it's calling someone that you care about. So it's like everyone can do it. It's just the thoughts that you have that are preventing you from doing it. And I think even recognizing the thoughts that prevent you from those 5 minutes to yourself can tell you a lot about how you respect yourself.
Absolutely. Right?
Because your time is you. You're living your life. No one else is living your life. So if you can't make time for yourself, what does that tell you about how you think about yourself? What does that tell you about your own time? What does that tell you about who's allowing to live your life versus you being able to live your life? Because I feel like I meet some people where they're just like, oh, like I'm so busy, I don't have time for anyone, or I don't have time for myself. And it's sad, because I feel like you should always have time for yourself first, because you're living your life. Why would you let other people live your life? Of course, live it with people, but like initially you got to remember, you were born alone and you're probably going to die alone. So it's like you might as well make sure that you have the respect for yourself first. And if you have respect for yourself, you'll have a much better, I think, relationship with the people around you, because you're coming from a place of like self-respect and self-fulfillment. And once you self-actualize eventually, I think you're just so much more fulfilled, and you're able to connect with people on a better level too.
Totally.
Because you're kind of living outside of the matrix. You're kind of living in a way that's a little bit more conscious in communication and in thought. So it's like you can just explore your conversations and relationships in a much, much deeper setting.
Yeah, totally.
Right.
The first step to living an examined life is to examine your life. And one of the things that I've noticed from teaching yoga for so long, and one of the pitfalls of any sort of practice, not just yoga, but any sort of spiritual practice, is that if you're not careful to practice enough, the practice itself, rather, will become the obstacle. Meaning that I've seen so many people that walk into these yoga spaces, right? And they tell me, wow, this is myself included, that's where my practice started. I went to yoga, I was doing 3-4 yoga classes a day, going every single day, just like a madman in these studios. And after doing this for years, I was still not happy. I was still not fulfilled. I still had this baseline of anxiety and stress and all these things, despite all the practicing of yoga. And that is because, as yoga is typically taught in the West, we bypass those two limbs. We go straight into the third limb, asana. And we fool ourselves into thinking that we can have some sort of realization without the introspection. So I had a teacher, Dr. Rauji, and
Rowdy?
Dr. Rao.
Rao. Oh.
I don't remember his last name, but I will definitely send that to you and so we can add it to the show notes. But this man is incredible. He came to do a lecture at Loyola Marymount University for the Yoga Studies graduate program. And I had an opportunity to meet him and talk to him for a bit. And he talked about the practice of yoga, specifically the 8 limbs. It's a practice that goes from the external to the internal, right? So we start with these practices on how we relate to ourselves and to other people. We go into physical postures of yoga, then we get into the breath, and then we get into the rest of the limbs. But as we go further in. So if we're bypassing the aspects of ourselves that lead us to understand, why are we making choices? Why do I want to grab a burger? Why do I feel like I need to have eggs with every meal? Why do I feel like I need to have cheese with everything that I order? Where does that come from? Where was that idea? Was that idea mine, or was that idea implanted into my mind? And then same thing with the practice of yoga and the practice of anything. Why do I want to do this? Why am I following this path? Why am I listening to this teacher and not this other teacher? And all of it always goes back to this idea that we are already enlightened. We are already self-actualized. We're already self-aware. But most of us live under the illusion that we're not. We live under, like your friend that says that, oh, Arjun, I just have no time. I have no time for myself. I'm so busy with other things. But you're never in a state where you don't have time for yourself, because to exist is to be in time, to be time itself, where like you're just making choices that seem like they're for someone else, but we're always just consciousness. We're always just experiencing the reality of our life. And if there is no awareness, then the subconscious mind is dictating where does our attention go and where does our effort go. So in Buddhism, it is taught right mindset, right view, right effort. These things are very important, but you can only discover that through sitting and observing the mechanisms behind the decision making, the reasons why we think the way that we do. Why do I feel this way? What does this meal make me feel like inside truly? And again, we can only see that if we create the space for us to like actually observe the self. My name is Gabriel. I am a yoga instructor, and if you want to learn more about yoga and mindfulness, and if you want to know the ways in which both of these practices can improve your life, follow me at endofsuffering.ai. Send me a message to book a private call now.
So I know you also, you have an interesting hobby. Like you like surfing, but right before you surf, because I remember I went surfing with you, you do yoga before.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. So how did you like bring yoga into surfing, or is it just something you could bring into anything?
That's an incredible question. So like I mentioned, I've been working with yoga more or less full time since about 2018. And it took about 2 years for me to get my private practice going, to really establish myself. And
as a yoga instructor?
As a yoga instructor,
2 years?
Yeah,
Wait, so you went, how long was the school for?
The teacher training course, it was a 200-hour teacher training certification that took about, if I'm remembering correctly, it was about 3 to 4 months.
Okay.
But there's this funny thing that happens in the beginning, and I think that a lot of people listening to this might be able to relate, where you graduate college, or you get your certification to be a life coach, or you get your teacher training certification or whatever, and you go looking for jobs. You go looking for a job doing the thing. And I'll speak for myself. I was going to these yoga studios trying to get hired to be a yoga teacher. Here's my yoga certificate that says that I can teach yoga. And they would say like, oh, well, you just had your certification. I'm sorry, come back when you have a little bit more experience. But I can't get the experience if I'm not getting hired. Yeah. So I was in this loop of just trying so hard to like teach. And basically I became the guy that was teaching all of my roommates. all of my neighbors, my cats, my dogs, my like anyone who would let me teach them yoga in the beginning. Those first 6 months, man, it was really, really challenging just to sort of like find anyone that would teach, that would allow me to teach them. And I was also so new, so there was like a lot of skills that needed to be developed and a lot of things that I needed to improve on. And so yeah, it took about 2 years to start really getting the groove of it, really like developing my personal practice, my private practice. I actually started teaching private yoga classes before I started teaching at studios. And then from teaching privates, I got better and better at it. And then when I started teaching at yoga studios, I was teaching, I think at my peak, this is in 2000, towards the end of 2019, I was teaching about 15 hot yoga classes per week, almost every single day without taking a day off. So also most people, if you do have your RYT, you probably know that teaching yoga at studios is not actually the most profitable thing you can do with your time. But I loved it so much. There was really nothing else that I wanted to do. And being a mechanic in the Air Force, I had the option to go work at a Lockheed, at a Boeing, at a what I still do. And I could make whatever doing that. But I wanted to be so far removed from that world, you know, because again, I had this realization when I left the military that the things that I've been a part of had created so much suffering in the world. And what does it look like to step into a way of being that does the opposite, that actually brings an end to suffering, unnecessary suffering in people's lives? So fast forward, 2 years in, Gabe is teaching yoga classes. I finally have a group. Feel like I finally hit my stride. I'm teaching all these yoga classes. I'm teaching, I believe at my peak, I had about 5 or 6 private clients. And I was working insane. I was working about 60 to 70 hours per week, teaching, plus commuting and driving to all these hot places. So I'm really feeling the stress of that. My body was starting to shut down because it was too much and it wasn't really sustainable. And then the pandemic happened, and it was, looking back at it now, it was such a blessing. And I know that a lot of people suffered in that time as well. But for me, it created this incredible space where, like, just like when I signed up for my yoga teacher training, I went back to zero. In the beginning, no one knew what the pandemic was, so I didn't feel comfortable teaching private classes. So I returned all the money to all my private clients for that month and for basically the rest of that. So my private practice got completely shut down. All these yoga studios and gyms and different facilities where I was teaching at, obviously everything shut down. So my income went all the way back to zero again. And I didn't have a backup plan. I didn't have literally had nothing else that I could possibly do at the time. And I was having a bit of an existential crisis. I was sitting there thinking to myself, what do I do now? You know, what could I possibly do with my life? All I wanted to do was yoga. I've worked so hard for so long to make it, and now here I am back to zero. And in my meditation, I had this download. It came so clearly, and I call it a download because it didn't feel like a thought that was mine. It felt like it was something that came from somewhere else. And the thought was this: you moved to LA, you meaning myself, moved to LA to learn how to surf. Since I was a little kid, I always wanted to learn how to surf. I'd been working for almost 3 years, had never gone to the beach, not once. I lived in Koreatown, around this area, and I spent so much of my life working to try to make ends meet, to pay for my bills, that I never made time for myself to do the thing that I actually came out here to do in the first place. So I said, fuck it, dude, let's go surfing. Also, luckily enough, the only thing you could do in LA during the pandemic, during the lockdown, was go surf. You weren't even allowed to hang out at the beach, but if you went to the beach with a surfboard, that would actually let you go into the water. And of course, distance and whatever. So yeah.
Okay, hold on. So let me get this straight. Was there maybe a metaphorical meaning, I want to overcome this obstacle and learn how to surf, or was it more like perhaps your inner child that you wanted to fulfill that dream, and maybe all right, if I can fulfill my inner child, then I can maybe find a purpose after I really.
That's so beautiful. I wish that was the answer. I'm gonna take that. I'm gonna take that, Arjun.
Just
I'm gonna use
that was it. So you legit were just my life is fucked. I'm gonna go surfing. I'm gonna move over there to California.
I'm gonna save this for my memoir. Thank you. No, it really was that, my dude. It was literally It felt like I describe it as like a surrendering. Surrendering into what is. You know what? I want to teach yoga, but I can't. I want to continue to live this life, but I can't. I was also I was overworked. I was like really like burning out. So I was at this place where like I didn't even feel like I had the mental capacity to like start a business online and do like, and I tried doing the online yoga thing and it just was not me at the time.
I see. I think I see what your logic is. Like, there is some logic to it. I think what it was is you were just like burnt out and you're just like, you know what, I need to do something to really reset myself.
Yes.
And I think going back to something that can really just like help you meditate back into yourself.
Totally.
Like a sport would be surfing, because I feel like that with snowboarding, which is kind of similar to surfing, but like when I do snowboard, it's just me by myself. I'm listening to my music. I got my little hot chocolate in my hand, hoping that I don't fall. And I'm just like chilling, and like it's like almost like you're in the shower when you just have your own thoughts to yourself. That's how snowboarding feels like to me. So I think surfing might have been like your subconscious kind of nudging you to like go there, do this, ride the waves, and you'll be able to see your life a little bit more clear.
1000%. Dude, that's it. You nailed it. I have another teacher that would say our capacity to enjoy anything is directly proportional to our ability to be present for it. So why do we enjoy these sports? Why do we enjoy these events and these things that like really, like make us feel good? It's because they capture our attention. You go to a movie and you're like, wow, that movie was incredible. It's incredible because for that 2 hours, you're not Arjun, you're the spectator. You're the witness of the unfolding of this incredible story that is happening. So surfing, I also love snowboarding, rock climbing, all these things that I do. Even when I was racing motorcycles, like you're so in it. There is no space for anything else. You're so involved in that task that we give ourselves fully to that presence. And a lot of what self-actualization in that process looks like, and what does enlightenment look like, is this capacity to be so engrossed in life from a pure sense of awareness that all the narratives that we construct sort of fade away. Everything falls apart. And the anxiety, the fear, the shame, the things that we experience are oftentimes tied to ideas of the past or ideas of the future. But in the present moment, when we learn to live in that space of the now, there is only peace. There is only your life. There is only time for you. There is no such thing as I don't have time for myself, because you're always in your time for yourself, for the rest of your life. And then some people give themselves the gift of really living there, and other people waste their life thinking of some sort of future that never arrives, because the future never does it? We can make these plans and we can make these different things, but at every moment, the only thing that exists is the moment. So for me, I was in a moment where I realized that the only thing I'm literally able to do by the law, by the world, by the universe, by whatever, was take my surfboard that was covered in dust and, that I hadn't even touched, for years, and go to the beach, man.
Yeah.
So I start surfing, and as I'm surfing, I'm starting to feel good. I'm struggling a lot, but I'm learning a lot. I'm like, okay, what would actually make my surfing a little bit better? What if I started just doing a little bit of yoga on the beach? And I started doing that, and I started like stretching, and then other surfers would see me and they would say, hey man, like I've been dying to go, my yoga studio shut down. Do you think I can practice with you before we go in? I'm like, yeah, bro, just 6 feet or whatever. And the next thing I know, like this whole sort of community started growing around me just from me showing up for myself, just from me doing something for myself. And that's how the Yoga and Surf Society was born. And then I noticed that for a lot of my friends that surf, their capacity to move in the water incredibly increased whenever they would practice. And this wasn't just me saying that this was also what they were reporting, and it has to do with everything. Yoga as a practice, as a healing modality is very special because it is a practice that combines the movement with the breath, right? So oftentimes when we think of powerlifting or cardio or anything else, we're always breathing and we're always moving, but we're adding a level of intentionality, at least in my classes, where now if you're able to take that, it has carry-on effects to any other sport or anything else that you might want to practice. So it became not just like a performance enhancer, but a performance sort of inviting, because now you're developing a practice that allows you to be more present, and your capacity to be present in surfing, in snowboarding, in anything else increases. So your capacity to enjoy that is also increasing. So yeah, man, so that's kind of where I find the merger of the two. And then I've also started studying hypnosis and self-hypnosis. So there's elements of that I incorporate into my classes, where I place people through the yoga practice into an altered state of mind that allows them to approach something and overcome their fears. So really now this experience, this Yoga and Surf Society, and these sessions that we do every Saturday, they've sort of morphed into something more than just a yoga class or a beginner surf lesson, but into an ability to be able to really challenge yourself and challenge your fears in a place that is safe, with someone that is there right next to you, so you don't have to be alone as you go through that. And you don't have to make the mistakes that I made when I was trying to teach myself how to surf at the beginning.
It sounds almost like a parallel to what they call in the school of psychology exposure therapy.
Yes.
Where, yeah, you've heard of it, right? So
Yes.
it's like that's kind of like it sounds really similar to that, where
Yes.
you're trying to really just get them to expose themselves to that fear in a safe setting.
Yes.
With their buddies, so it feels like you're kind of like, you're in it together, and it's not just you alone with that fear of a spider or whatever it may be.
I love that you mentioned that. I was exposed to the idea of exposure therapy when I was in high school. Growing up, I was incredibly unathletic. I was the kid that never got picked for sports or got picked last. I was the kid that had so many fears of public speaking, fears of socializing, fears of bugs and animals and this. And I had a fear of heights that it was so bad that in high school, if we would go to the mall, the movie theater was on the 3rd floor or the 4th floor, and it was one of those glass elevators,
Yeah.
and I would have to take the stairs.
No
And
way.
because I was so afraid of getting in the glass elevator, and all my buddies would make fun of me all the time because of that. And I read about exposure therapy, and I've incorporated that into every element of my life. And one of the things that I said to myself, and I said to my best friend at the time, was, dude, I do not want to graduate high school still being afraid of heights. So I went skydiving for the first time when I was 18, and it changed my life. And then my life from that moment on became, how many other things am I afraid of?
Really? So
I leaned
skydiving,
into
you
that.
think was like the thing that started it?
It was the thing that started, because it was the first time that I had just so drastically confronted something that I've been afraid of, and then finding myself on the other side of that, of just loving it and becoming obsessed with skydiving, which is one of the things that I want to do this year, is get my Type A license so I can jump without having to jump tandem. But yeah, man, it led me down this path of realizing that, wow, all the things that I'm afraid of, these themselves are not obstacles. These are opportunities. These are like, this is the path has been laid out for me to follow. What else am I afraid of? And that led to like backcountry snowboarding in Italy, and that led to yoga and public speaking. That led to these daily meditation videos that I do. That led to starting this yoga school, and then making this investment on a business coach, or making an investment on my yoga retreat. All of these things have been things that have terrified me, and they still terrify me. But now my relationship with that fear has completely shifted. And with the Yoga and Surf Society, I have so many people that say that, like, man, I love to surf. It looks so much fun, but I'm so scared of the ocean. And to that I say, great. I'm so grateful that you're here. You came to the perfect place, because that is my jam. My jam is to get people that are so terrified to do whatever, and to show them that there's actually something on the other side for them, that they're afraid of it.
No, but
Yeah, man. He might be a friend.
no, but I really like how you talk about how you faced this one huge fear in your life, and that led to like this momentum, the snowball effect of conquering other fears, and it just changed your life. And I think everyone needs to have this moment where they really pinpoint a really strong fear that's been controlling them and really preventing them and becoming an obstacle for a lot of things in their life. And once they conquer that first initial hurdle of that fear, they realize how powerful it is.
Yeah.
Once you conquer it. Because my skydiving moment was public speaking.
Yeah.
So my greatest fear, like out of heights, out of anything, out of any insect, out of any like animal, person, whoever, it was legit just public speaking. It was so bad to a point where when I was like very, very young in elementary school, if I knew that they were doing like, taking turns reading a certain paragraph in the book and I was going to be next, I would literally say I need to go to the restroom at that point. So I was trying to find like a sly way to escape because I was like, I do not want to read out loud because I'm going to fumble the words and I'm going to screw it up. I couldn't even read like in that setting, just sitting down, So
Wow.
when I joined the speech and debate team, I just got thrown right into it. Like I just didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
I was freaking out. Like I just remember my heart was racing. They were telling me to give a speech and like you got to read this out loud in front of the class and blah blah blah. And I just remember thinking that like I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die. I just kept telling myself that. And then it ended. I'm like, I'm not dead. I'm like, well, that kind of felt good. Like I just like got over it. And then it's just like, okay, it wasn't perfect. But then I'm like, well, no one else's was perfect either. And then I was just like, all right, so this whole speech and debate team, like legit, everyone was on the same boat. Like they did not know how to speak. People were scared. People were nervous. So like, it's okay to be scared because everyone else is scared. But I think finding the bravery to get through it and initially is very hard, but it's actually really rewarding because you start to realize what fear is. Yeah. And I write this in my book that if you really want to conquer fear, you have to first become it, right? But when you become it, you're able to not only face it, but you're able to utilize it as an ability. Because people will say to face your fear, right? But you don't want to just run from your demon and turn around and look at the demon. You want to face it and you want to analyze why that demon, because that demon ultimately is a reflection of you, why that demon is separate from you. And you want to look at it and become it. You want to integrate that demon, that fear into you and utilize it as an ability. And I think public speaking is such like a great example of becoming that fear, because once you realize that you're trying to run away from public speaking and you face it and you become it, public speaking becomes a superpower, right? Yeah. Just like the whole metaphorical story of Batman, which I reference a lot. It's him becoming his fear of bats. Yes. And by becoming his fear of bats, he's able to channel that and utilize it against his enemies. Yeah. So against your enemies of corruption or politics or whatever the enemy is that you're trying to use your public speaking for. Yeah. Maybe it's persuasion. Maybe it's just like a relationship. Maybe it's really a mellow type of battle that you're having. Yeah. It can really be a useful tool for you for the rest of your life. And I think once you realize like how powerful your fears are when they're on your side, when they're integrated into you, you start to realize like, all right, I need to find out what else I'm afraid of. If I'm afraid of dying in the ocean with sharks, maybe I should jump in the ocean and get eaten by a shark. Yeah, become Shark Man. I'm just kidding. But you know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, totally, man. No, I think, what we resist persists. And if we're always resisting our fears, it's always going to persist that. And what I love about your philosophy and what I love about your book and what you're sharing is exactly that, man. That like these things that feel like obstacles, these things that feel like hindrances, they are actually your greatest source of strength. And your superpower lies in becoming that. Not just facing it for the sake of facing it, but facing it because it has secondary and tertiary effects in your life. Because if you are afraid of the sharks and you do go out to the water or you go scuba diving with sharks and you see what it's like to be in front of this majestic creature and then you walk out of there like, wow, I am still alive. Everything else, what else am I afraid of? Then you start realizing that is the path for you to follow. That is the thing to go into because there we become unstoppable, like in the confrontation of those things. Yeah. I have so many maxims and quotes and things from teachers throughout my life. But one of them is this idea that whatever you're afraid of controls you. If I'm afraid of X, Y, or Z, that thing, the idea of that, I'm either like running away from it or I'm avoiding it. But then I will never confront that, Yeah. And if that's the case, then now there's this huge section of reality that I'm not even willing to interact with. So again, what does it look like to have courage? And courage is not the absence of fear. It is the showing up to the fear. It is the embracing of that fear fully and then the taking action despite the fear being present. And all of the greatest greatest strides I've made in my life, all of the greatest accomplishments, the most fulfilling, the highest peaks, the greatest experiences that I've had in my life, I have all of the one thing, the one thread that ties them all together is this, exactly that. It was something that I was deeply afraid of, or it was something that made me deeply uncomfortable, and something that I was able to face. And then I was able to sort of like alchemize it into this incredible source of strength for myself. And to end this little rant, when we do that, why is it important to do that, right? Why is it important to face your fears? Not just for the sake of power, not just for the sake of these gifts, but when we do these things and we step into these spaces, we give other people around us permission to do the same. So back to this idea of like we're creating reality with our minds. And there is a co-creation that is happening in this matrix that we live in, where if I live in a world where I am willing to step into the things that make me uncomfortable and things that I'm afraid of, then every single person around me benefits. Every single person gets to see what it looks like to do that, and then now they get to step into that space as well. And what does it look like for us to create tribes and communities and groups that are deeply committed to that, deeply committed to facing everything that they're afraid of? You know, an army that is not afraid is an army that's unstoppable. And I think that's what's called for in the modern age. You know, what we talked about earlier, warriors of Shambhala, fighting for a heaven that already exists, that's already here. A nation that is outside of borders, or a nation that is outside of ideas or institutions, but it is just the deep human desire to flourish and to live in a world that is free of unnecessary suffering.
For sure.
Let's go swim with some sharks whenever we get a chance.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, thank you so much, Gabe. I appreciate you coming on this channel, and yeah, hope to see you soon.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for listening. My name is Gabriel. Thank you, Arjun, for having me. We'll hope to see you very soon. Stay tuned for more episodes and more content coming.
And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. You already know the drill. Peace begins on your dinner plate. Chaos out, my people.